It's easy to confuse what is with what ought to be.
What are economic lessons we can learn from Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon? This video is part of a series we're dropping as Season 2 of House of the Dragon is being dropped. If you love Game of Thrones, if you love House of the Dragon, please like and subscribe. You'll get more content. I'm going to go to a conversation with me and recent Susquehanna University graduate Daniel Bragen. We collaborated on the Econ Thrones website, Economic Lessons from Game of Thrones, and we show some clips, discuss them, and find the insights that we can learn about the economy through them. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, let's get to the first clip, where we see Tyrion and some others in the fighting pits.
You don't approve? There's always been more than enough death in the world for my taste. I can do without it in my leisure time.
Fair enough. Yet, it's an unpleasant question. But what great thing has ever been accomplished without killing or cruelty?
It's easy to confuse what is with what ought to be, especially when what is has worked out in your favor.
Interesting clip, a very short clip, but it does discuss what is or what ought to be. Kind of an important question within economics. So Dan, I'll let you kind of take over why we are watching and showing this clip.
Well, I guess first in the clip, Tyrion speaking to a former slaveholder, I believe at that point in the clip. And the former slaveholder's like, all these terrible things happen in the world or happen for a reason. They have to happen in order for great things to happen. And Tyrion quips back and he's like, just because that's happened previously and that's been the case does not mean that it has to be the case in the future, and sort of makes it clear that what has been does not have to be what is in the future. And it sort of gets at an interesting thing with economics, and I think a problem you frequently see when economics is talked about is this normative versus positive statements. Normative statements being statements of norms, essentially, right? Statements of beliefs, morality, things of that nature, whereas positive being statements of fact, of economic law, fact, in evidence. Sometimes people discuss a tax policy and they're like, well, it'll cut jobs this, so we shouldn't support it. And it's like, there's an underlying claim behind that about, well, we should be pro-jobs, or we should be pro or anti-wage inequality, or things of that nature. And it's important to know the difference between normative and positive claims and be able to disentangle that within your analysis.
Yeah, and I mean, you raise a good point. A lot of what we try to do in principles of economics is we try to focus on the positive, at least at first. So the understanding of what will happen. The normative, I think, is very important. But the normative comes from understanding the positive. Like, if you do this to, if you create a specific policy, what will happen? And okay, we could have different guesses at what will happen, but what will happen? And then there is the normative question of, should that policy be put in place or not? So first, for those who've had principles of economics, but maybe it's been a while, it usually should be focusing a little bit more on the positive. I know that as an instructor, when the normative comes up, I actually try to make it quite clear, look, this is my normative view. This is my view. So this is not the positive analysis. It's taking the positive and trying to put my values on weighing different things onto it. The second thing is, I think a lot of people who advocate for policy will integrate the two. And I'm probably just as guilty of that as anybody if advocating for something specific, is to say, here's what happens, which means we should do this, right? It's in many ways putting the positive economics, what is a fact, and combining it right into the normative. But I do love that, like, what ought to be phrase is in there. It's so many phrases of this. There had to have been economists who were working on some of these lines.
Right. And it's even harkens back to David Hume and his, the is-ought fallacy, which, if we're talking about normative positive philosophy, is definitely an aspect of this normative part. And yeah, I think you hit on everything else I wanted to say. Yeah, I think it's a great clip.
So
What
we bring
exactly?
this clip to talk a little bit about creative destruction. Dan, do you want to define for us creative destruction for the viewers?
Yeah, creative destruction. It's a kind of a weird phrase for something that most people are most definitely familiar with, but it's a process within an economy when I suppose a new an industry has established itself. There's established players, but there's a smaller player in the field, and they begin to innovate. And through that process, they become the dominant player, and they destroy the previous dominant player, I guess, and destroy it in a sense. And it's sort of that process of markets adapting to people's needs and wants, and old players who are unable or unwilling to adapt falling to the wayside.
Yeah, and so I mean, in this clip, we're seeing like the war clip and shooting down of one of the dragons. How do we think this clip relates then to creative destruction?
Well, we know Daenerys, who's the woman on the dragon there. She is the mother of dragons, so she raises these dragons from hatchlings, from
Yep.
eggs, until there's these big, large dragons, and they're a massive threat to the rest of the world. And Daenerys wants to stake her claim as the on the Iron Throne, and others don't want that. So they try to devise ways to bring down the dragons, basically, because they are the biggest threat. How else can you take down a dragon? So Bronn is seen; he's a member of the other factions. Bronn is seen using this. I'm not sure what it's called, but this wooden, essentially machine, and
Yep.
it shoots an arrow, a large arrow at the dragon, which hurts it and takes it down and kills it. And very similar to other sort of if you think of in the phone market, things like Nokia used to be the largest phone provider in the world, are unwilling to or unable to adapt to the people's needs in the new market, and things like Apple crop
Yeah.
up and take it over, and in the same
Yeah,
way
and
Apple's acting as that bow.
yeah, and Apple, I mean, boy, it's not even just the phone market, right? The smartphone market really took out the camera industry, right? Kodak
Yep.
was one of the top companies in the world for many, many years, couldn't adapt. So this one's showing it violently, like violence in part of that. The other part that I actually like for this clip to think about for creative destruction is here we're literally seeing things destroyed and in rubble because you see war. And that's the one way that Daenerys they're trying to conquer, right? Conquer and seize land. Whereas creative destruction, it's the general idea that new products will come out. They'll make people better off. They'll love these particular products. So society's well-being has gone up, but then there are some companies that get destroyed in the process. That process makes society better off. The process of the war we were seeing here in attempting to seize land, society as a whole is definitely not better off. Now, some people could be better off if they seize land, but not society, as it's not this market system that's allowing innovation.
And I think it's even related to our discussion of normative versus positive in a sense. That when you see creative, I mean, at least creative destruction in the real world isn't as violent as this, but people do lose their businesses because they aren't unable to innovate. People do get fired and laid off until they find work elsewhere, and the market responds accordingly. But that process is a messy process in and of itself.
Yeah.
And for some people, that's disheartening, and they don't like it, and it's hard for them to swallow that pill. But the alternative, the opportunity cost you're giving up if you don't want that is innovation and better goods and things of that nature. So
And
yeah,
right
it's
now, I
interesting.
think the key one that everybody's grappling with now is how is artificial intelligence going to change things? How will that make various tasks more efficient? And how will it be used? And what are the ethics behind it? I know several people I know and really like or do not want it used for various art forms. They think it's wrong that it would be used like in art at all. Others have the opposite view of thinking, wow, if this could help make more and better TV scripts or more and better art available to the mass, that's fantastic. That, speaking of the normative versus positive, right, comes down to how will these things go? What ought we do to ensure regulations, right? Hollywood was having a major discussion on how much should AI be involved in, say, script writing process in that recent strike. So it's pretty fascinating, I think, in these two clips and how they tie together a little bit. Thank you for watching until the end. There will be more economics of Game of Thrones and economics of House of the Dragon content coming weekly during Season 2 of House of the Dragon, so please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next video.